Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, good evening from Brussels, good afternoon to New York. If anybody is listening from the Pacific, a very early good morning to you as well. And welcome to this side event at the 17th session of the United Nations Forum on Forests to discuss how we can move towards deforestation-free supply chains. My name is Astrid Schomaker. I'm Director for Green Diplomacy and Multilateralism in the European Commission in Brussels, and I will be moderating this event today. It's both an honor and really a pleasure for me because I think we have lined up for you a very interesting set of speakers and panelists to examine this question of deforestation-free supply chains, which is a question that has been occupying the international community for quite a while and which in a way has been eluding us because, as I think all of you know, and as you have also seen in our concept note, we find ourselves still in a situation where we are confronted with dramatic forest loss. And despite all the commitments that we have seen internationally, despite all the actions already taken, this is a phenomenon that persists. So it is clear that the international community has to step up action, and how we can best do that. This is what we would like to discuss with you in the next 75 minutes. Those are probably going to run very quickly, so I'm going to now also immediately hand over to our first speaker, and it's my honor to introduce to you the permanent representative of Costa Rica to the UN, Ambassador Rodrigo Alberto Carazo-Zeledon, who will, on behalf of one of the co-hosts, Costa Rica, say a few words to you.
Thank you very much. And it's always a great honor to participate jointly with the European Union in all of these multilateral efforts to learn from them and to put our experiences also for the knowledge of other people through the joint efforts. And well, it was mentioned that there would be some very interesting speakers. I'm the least interesting of the speakers today, but I may become a very interesting one as you visit Costa Rica and you visit us in our forests, in my family's forest that is a reality thanks to the program that Jorge Mario Rodriguez will introduce. And in the tourist industry there, so more significant for us is that Costa Rica has engaged into this reforestation program, which makes us so proud in the world and leads us not only to have recognition in different fora at the United Nations and environmental entities, but also at the grassroots level where people go and visit us. We are therefore, upon our example, our lessons, what we have learned, we are striving for the High Ambition Coalition together with France and England and more than 70, United Kingdom and no more than 70 other countries or 90 other countries, 100 countries, they tell me here now, who are striving to have a protection of 30% of the land mass and 30% of the ocean mass. We are there in the first line. We put all of our efforts to achieve the Paris Agreement in terms of reforestation and in terms of all the goals that it has. We have been, we are an active member of the High Forest and Low Deforestation Group, which is currently chaired by Suriname and made up mostly of developing mega diverse countries. And we have shared experiences with other environmental friendly economic recovery countries in the aftermath of COVID, and this we have done at the World Trade Organization basis of the platform. We're actually current following discussions regarding an agreement on climate change, trade and sustainability in which Costa Rica, Fiji, Iceland, Norway, Switzerland have launched in 2019 with the aims of lowering barriers to environmental friendly goods and services, addressing fossil fuel subsidies, and establish guidelines for eco labels, which is also very important for us. We are supportive of the Alliance for the Tropical Rainforest, which is being led by France and many other countries, and about which we also will learn later on from Ambassador Guignard, who will address the group. But yes, more important, we as Costa Rica are very, very proud to present this experience, to present this reality. And yes, let's please visit us soon, and you'll see this in the ground in full dimension. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think there is not a single person in the audience who would now not want to take you up on that invitation and visit Costa Rica and see for themselves the beauties of your country. Can I
wait till you see here?
Can I hand over to the European Union now? So the deputy head of our EU delegation, Ambassador Silvio Gonzato, is with us. And Silvio, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Astrid. And I need not be long because you are the expert really on such matters, and it's a real pleasure to have you participate. That's one of the few positive consequences of COVID, is that we have learned how to connect also across the Atlantic in a more sustainable way, rather than have people fly in all the time. But let me welcome also, on behalf of the European Union delegation, all the participants in this side event, which we are co-organizing with our Costa Rican friends. And I would like to use this opportunity to express our gratitude to Costa Rica. You're such a strong partner for the European Union on issues of forest, but not just, more generally on the whole environmental agenda. We've always worked very well with you. You've been an incredible partner in this respect. I think the concept note illustrates quite clearly the urgency of the matter. The reports issued by the FAO estimate that about 10% of the world's forests, an area which is larger than the European Union actually, have been lost in the past 30 years. So the pace is really quite disconcerting, and it's quite worrying. And deforestation is not something that concerns just a limited area, which is a local phenomenon. It has global impact. It affects us all by driving climate change, and also by pushing the extinction of what is so far 1 million species of animals and plants. So it has a huge consequences. And at COP26 back in Glasgow, 140 countries and the European Union committed to halt and reverse forest loss by 2030. That means that we have less than 8 years to do this. It's a huge task, and we need to act urgently and with concrete measures. As a major consumer of commodities which are linked to deforestation, the EU also feels responsible for this space, for this phenomenon and this problem. And this is why we're trying to address our own responsibilities with a proposal for a regulation against deforestation that I'm sure Astrid will illustrate in detail. This is a proposal which we believe will mark a decisive turning point in the global fight against deforestation. And it is one of the key deliverables of our European Green Deal, which is the compass, which is, let's say, informing, it is defining all our policies, and which addresses two major environmental challenges of our time. One is global warming, and the other one is biodiversity loss. But we don't want to limit our efforts to what happens inside the European Union. We also want to help partners around the world. We particularly want to help producing countries step up on the protection of their forests, and we want to support their transition towards sustainability, and are aiming to set up cooperation programs to make sure that our partners take benefit from our own experience in this respect. So I'll stop here, Astrid, and I'll hand over to you, wishing all the participants a very fruitful and, I hope, informative discussion and exchanges of experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, or I should say thank you, ambassadors, for this great lead into our discussion. I should maybe just say a few words about how we're going to do this. As you would have seen from the program, the two co-hosts will each present their policies fighting deforestation. Then we will move to comments mostly from our panel. We have a representative from the UN, from UNDP. We have some from industry, from the responsible soil roundtable, and also from an NGO, who will all give their perspective on the global fight against deforestation. When they're done with their initial presentations, we move to a panel discussion. At that point, my colleague Jorge Rodriguez will also join that panel. He is the head of our delegation currently at the UNFF, and was incidentally one of the main drafters of the regulation proposal that Ambassador Gonzalez has already mentioned. So we will see at the end how much time we have. There is a chat function, as you know, so please also put your questions in the chat. If there is time, we will try and pick them up and integrate them into the panel discussion. And the last small logistical comment, but I think everybody's by now familiar. After 2 years of video conferencing, left, right, and center, please all mute your microphones when you're not speaking. And we have one presentation in Spanish from Jorge Maria Rodriguez, who will speak right after me. And we have translation for that into English. For that, you need to press the translation button, probably at the bottom of your screen in most cases, and select English if you would like to follow the English interpretation. So with that, I'm in a slightly unusual situation to have to give the floor to myself and to present to you our policy against deforestation. And at this very moment, my screen has gone black. I hope you can now see my presentation. Could somebody please confirm? If you're still seeing me, that was not the idea. Why does that not work? Okay. Trying this again. Can somebody please nod and tell me that you can now see my presentation so I don't lose too much time?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. So what I wanted to say with this presentation, that will go very quickly in the beginning. You have already heard in the scene setter and from others that the action we're taking against deforestation, we're doing against the background of continued worldwide forest loss. This is a forest loss that in significant amounts is actually the result of legal activities in many countries. It is very largely provoked by the expansion of agricultural land, and the EU has an important role in this because we are the consumer of a number of commodities that are associated with deforestation and forest degradation. And that means that for us, we would like to take action not just against deforestation happening in the European Union, deforestation and forest degradation, but also against the contribution we're making to worldwide deforestation. Now, we believe in order to succeed, we need to act on a number of tracks simultaneously, and we have set those out in a policy paper. We call that a communication issued about 3 years ago, called Stepping Up EU Action to Protect and Restore the World's Forests. And there we have identified 5 tracks of action. Firstly, reducing the EU consumption footprint, and I will focus on this in particular today. Secondly, obviously working in partnership with the producing countries, so addressing also the supply side. Thirdly, strengthen international cooperation, the current UNFF prime example of that. Fourthly, redirecting finance in support of more sustainable land use practices. And then, very importantly, also focusing on supporting research and innovation and improving the access to information, the availability of information to all actors in the supply chain. Now, I want to particularly speak about a proposal, a legal proposal the European Commission has been making at the end of 2021 for a regulation to combat global deforestation. What we want to achieve, and I repeat myself here, is to minimize the EU's contribution to deforestation and forest degradation worldwide. Of course, that is important, and the ambassador has just said that because deforestation is such a crucial contributor to climate change and biodiversity loss. More specifically, we would like to minimize the risk that products coming from supply chains associated with deforestation or forest degradation are placed on the EU market, while increasing the EU demand for trade in legal and deforestation-free commodities and products. Now, this is what the regulation, the law that we are discussing in the European Union now is all about. It's a proposal. The co-legislators are discussing it at the moment. Co-legislators means for us, our member states, and the directly elected representatives in the European Parliament. We followed a set of principles, notably that of non-discrimination of imported and domestically produced products. It is about transparency and accountability. We have based ourselves, we believe, on a very sound scientific and methodological basis in selecting the commodities we will focus on in particular. And of course, we have very carefully examined that our proposal respects international commitments. Now, in the scope of our proposal are currently 6 commodities: palm oil, soy, wood, cattle, cocoa, and coffee, and some derived products that are made with or from these commodities, for example, leather, chocolate, or furniture. I should say right from the beginning, this is what we call a progressive scope. Depending on what science tells us, the deforestation trends we observe, this scope will be updated regularly and most likely expanded to further products. And I want to say again, the regulation applies in the same way to domestically produced and imported commodities and derived products. Now, very importantly, we have proposed a cutoff date of 31st December 2020. What does it mean? It means that commodities are not allowed to enter the EU market if they are produced on land subject to deforestation after that date. And I should probably say only if they are produced on land subject to deforestation after that date, meaning that the vast amount of global trade in the commodities in questions will not be affected. Now, for aficionados and especially people working in New York and being very familiar with the SDGs, I think you have immediately recognized the date 31st December 2020. This is indeed the date enshrined in SDG 15, by which the global community has committed itself to halt deforestation. So this is what we are trying to do here, abiding by our own commitments. Now, quickly, the main elements of the proposal, and recognizing I'm already beyond the 5 minutes that I should have stuck to. Our key mechanism that we want to introduce is that of mandatory due diligence, and that builds on a lot of legislative experience we have in the European Union with existing legislation combating illegal logging. Mandatory due diligence rules for all operators that place relevant commodities and products on the EU market or export them from the EU. They will have to do the due diligence to attest and mitigate the risk, if necessary, that these products are both deforestation-free and legal, according to the laws of the country of production. And only if they can ascertain that and can attest it with a due diligence statement they would have to file with the competent authorities, will they be allowed to put the commodity or the product on the EU market or export it from the EU market. Now, we are basing ourselves on existing definitions, in particular those done by the FAO, but also those used already in the European Union in relevant legislation. The core element of this proposal is the strict traceability. And that means linking the commodity to the plot of land where it was produced. And I'm sure we will discuss that a bit more in a little bit. We will also set up internally an information system where the due diligence statements that I've already mentioned will be hosted and collected, and that will allow a better information exchange, in particular between the enforcement authorities of our member states, and therefore hopefully make the regulation a very effective tool to combat deforestation. Now, talking about an effective tool, and that brings me to a few other elements I would like to briefly mention. We are proposing a benchmarking system that allows to assign a risk status to countries or parts of countries according to the level of risk of deforestation, which could be low, standard, or high. Now, of course, this is not something that my colleagues and I sitting in our offices at home in Brussels will decide by ourselves. This will be a process of dialogue and information exchange with partner countries concerned. But it is important Because if a country or part of a country were to be identified as a high-risk country, there would be specific obligations for member states' authorities in the sense of enhanced scrutiny for high-risk countries or for products that are placed in our market coming from high-risk countries. If, on the other hand, a product is sourced from a low-risk country, there would be a simplified due diligence for the operator to carry out. We have foreseen minimum level of inspections for member states' authorities to perform, and then also effective, proportionate, and dissuasive penalties. All that is to make sure that we're not creating some sort of paper tiger, but a legislative instrument that actually works and has an impact. Now, as my very last comment here, I would like to speak about cooperation with partners as a key pillar. You may remember from the first slide that I mentioned, this is the second strand of our five-track policy, but it is also enshrined already in our legislative proposal. So very crucially, first of all, we are not foreseeing a ban against any country or any commodity. Secondly, it is absolutely important to say that we will work closely with and support our partner countries' efforts to promote the transition to sustainable agricultural production, sustainable forest management, and the development of transparent and sustainable supply chains. That will mean a very intensive dialogues with all producer countries of the commodities that I have mentioned in the beginning, to understand what are the difficulties in a particular countries, what is the situation of smallholders, how can we support smallholders and others in the country and the government's building capacity in order to enable them to reap the benefits of this regulation and place the products on the EU market devoid of competition from products that are actually harvested, not respecting deforestation commitments. And largely, we will also intensify engagement with other consumer countries, China, US, India, come to mind, and in international fora, because much as the European Union, we will want to take action, we will take action. Doing it alone will not have the results we want, and therefore we are hoping to start a process where other countries will join us, and where the sustainability of the agricultural supply chains linked to deforestation becomes the norm. I leave it at that, and will try and leave the screen, which previously I haven't mentioned, and apologize for being a bit long, but this is what we are planning at the moment, what we're discussing internally. And that was our first background input, I would say. And the second background input, we will now hear from our Costa Rican co-hosts, from Jorge Maria Rodriguez, who is the director of FONAFIFO, which is Costa Rica's National Forest Fund, and he will explain to us how Costa Rica is fighting deforestation. Now, small reminder, Jorge will speak in Spanish. If you like, we have a translation button and you can follow the interpretation in English. Jorge, over to you.
Okay. Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Buenas tardes, señor embajador. Muy buenas tardes a todas y todos. ¿Me escuchan? Muchas gracias a Astrid por la información que nos presenta sobre esta iniciativa de la Unión Europea con respecto al tema que tiene que ver con las cadenas de suministros libres de deforestación. Es precisamente por eso que quisiera contar un poco la experiencia que hemos tenido nosotros en Costa Rica, en donde decimos hoy que hoy tenemos más bosque que el que teníamos ayer por una serie de políticas y decisiones que creemos como costarricenses muy valientes para detener la deforestación y pensar también que podemos aspirar a un desarrollo verde en armonía con la naturaleza. Para pasarla aquí es nada más. Ok. Cuando nosotros hablamos de políticas y programas para combatir la deforestación en Costa Rica, nos gusta hacer un recuento de cuál es la situación actual que tenemos nosotros como país en el aspecto forestal. De acuerdo al último informe de monitoreo realizado en el marco de las acciones Red Costa Rica, decimos que tenemos una cantidad de bosque de 3.1 millones de hectáreas, lo que viene a significar un poquito más del 60% del territorio nacional. Esto no siempre ha sido así. Costa Rica en la década de los 70 fue un campeón en la deforestación, producto de las políticas macroeconómicas de ese momento, para darle espacio a productos tradicionales para hoy en Costa Rica de exportación, como lo fue el café, el banano, la ganadería, que muy bien lo señala la señora Astrid, en donde dice que mucho de la pérdida de cobertura forestal en el mundo es precisamente por la expansión de la frontera agrícola. Sin embargo, desde hace más de 30 años, como país hemos tomado decisiones definiendo políticas públicas para contrarrestar esos motores de la deforestación. Motores que podemos identificarlo como la tala ilegal, la pérdida de biomasa por los incendios, el escaso monitoreo ciudadano que se daba en aquel entonces, porque más bien era un problema para la gente hacer las denuncias, o muchas veces porque no existía la normativa que pudiera tener eco para así frenar o parar esas acciones que iban en contra de los recursos naturales. La tenencia de la tierra también ha sido un factor importante de los drivers o de los drivers de la deforestación. ¿Por qué esto? Porque si no se tiene certeza jurídica de que en mi finca es de quien corresponde, pues ahí es donde se dan las cosas ilegales, y producto de ello es que muchas veces se descrema el bosque, se deforesta, y por lo tanto la ampliación de la frontera agropecuaria se extiende y muchas veces en forma muy desordenada. Entonces, ¿qué hemos hecho nosotros para contrarrestar esto? Bueno, tenemos fortalecido y mejorado un sistema de control de la tala ilegal con un sistema nacional de áreas de conservación robustecido. Tenemos un programa de manejo de fuegos, en donde ahí muchos de la cooperación internacional que hemos recibido ha sido precisamente para esto, lo cual ha desarrollado una estrategia importante y que también nos evita a nosotros perder cobertura forestal precisamente por esa situación. Hemos desarrollado y consolidado una amplia gama de áreas silvestres protegidas. Fortalecimos el programa de los COVIRENAS, que es los comités de vigilancia de los recursos naturales, con una participación de la sociedad civil que le permita a las autoridades nacionales, tanto el Ministerio de Ambiente y Energía como el Ministerio de Seguridad, cumplir con esa labor de la protección de los recursos naturales. Hemos participado a esos poseedores, o sea, los que no tienen títulos de propiedad, de los beneficios económicos que se derivan de la protección del bosque, con el programa de pago por servicio ambiental, y establecidos también, fortalecidos más bien en la ley de ecomercados, que fue una ley que involucraba un empréstito con el Banco Mundial, precisamente para fortalecer el programa de pago por servicios ambientales. También nosotros, considerando que la degradación de los bosques es muy difícil de controlar, sin embargo ya se han identificado los problemas y las posibles causas, y precisamente estamos atacándola con ello. La prohibición del cambio de uso de suelo, y aquí tal vez quiero hacer énfasis. Costa Rica desde 1996, vía la ley forestal de ese año, se prohibió el cambio de uso forestal, y eso ha sido una decisión valiente, pero también nos ha permitido no solamente proteger la cobertura forestal, sino también desarrollar, producto de eso, una serie de mecanismos importantes para el desarrollo del país, como lo es la consolidación del ecoturismo, que es para nosotros la principal fuente de ingreso que hoy por hoy tenemos. Bueno, antes de la pandemia, pero ya lo estamos reactivando por dicha. Tenemos la prohibición, tenemos por las iniciativas estas de los NAMAs ganadería y NAMA café. los namas café y namas ganadería. Y en esto quería comentarles una iniciativa que precisamente es producto del acompañamiento y el apoyo que tenemos del PNUD Costa Rica, de la GIZ, en concurso y en acompañamiento con el Ministerio de Agricultura y Ganadería y el Ministerio de Ambiente, con la empresa privada y la academia, en donde hemos desarrollado todo un sistema que le llamamos MOCUP, o sea, monitoreo del cambio de uso de la tierra en paisajes productivos. Y con este sistema, que nos ha dado muy buenos resultados en estos años, poquitos que tenemos de implementarlo, es que hemos determinado cómo, haciendo comparaciones de imágenes de satélites de años atrás o del año anterior, podemos nosotros verificar que los cultivos, y en este caso la ganadería también, no crezca en cuanto a actividad productiva para el país a costa de los bosques. Entonces, teniendo presente que en Costa Rica existe la prohibición de cambio de uso forestal, nosotros con el apoyo del PNUD, GIZ, venimos monitoreando todas las áreas de cultivo, las comparamos año con año para ver el balance. Y al comparar esas hectáreas productivas, nosotros podemos determinar si efectivamente ahí hubo cambio de uso forestal en donde impedimos que las áreas de bosque se conviertan en pastos o se conviertan en cultivos, y precisamente es por eso que estamos nosotros con estas iniciativas buscando ese reconocimiento para decir todo aquel producto exportable que sale de Costa Rica es un producto libre de deforestación, y yo creo que en esto coincidimos totalmente con la propuesta y lo que estableció la señora Astrid de la Comunidad Europea. En cuanto a otras acciones que nosotros hemos hecho, ya para concluir, tenemos el programa de financiamiento forestal, que es un programa de un reconocimiento económico al dueño de la finca, al que siembra árboles o al que reforesta. También tenemos un sistema de créditos en condiciones muy diferenciadas de la banca comercial para la parte forestal. Tenemos también, y muy importante para nuestro país, para decir que hemos venido trabajando con esa gente que vive en los bosques, la participación de los territorios indígenas que hay en el país en cuanto a la definición de políticas y la participación de los beneficios a esta gente que para el caso de Costa Rica representa un 8% del territorio nacional, y son ellos los que ancestralmente han manejado el bosque de manera tal que puedan decir que lo han conservado y que le han servido para su desarrollo en las condiciones apropiadas de las cuales la cultura así lo establece. Tenemos también otros sistemas mixtos de pago por servicios ecosistémicos, en donde también ahí favorecemos no solamente la protección del bosque o la siembra de árboles, sino también nos interesa mucho contribuir con el campesino, con ese pequeño productor, para que en esas otras áreas de la finca que no es bosque, pueda hacer acciones también sostenibles que no vayan en detrimento de los recursos naturales y que le permitan a ellos tener un mayor ingreso, pero con menos emisiones y una mayor rentabilidad de su cultivo, para también así evitar la migración del campo a la ciudad. Tenemos todo un programa de plantaciones para aprovechamiento forestal también con pequeños productores, y también estamos desarrollando un proyecto piloto con una fundación cerca en la zona norte del país, con la intención de hacer ver que si bien la reforestación es un cultivo a largo plazo, puede un pequeño productor insertarse y gozar de los beneficios, obteniendo no solo buena asistencia técnica, sino buenos rendimientos y calidad de madera. Y también, ya por último, decir que el programa RED ha permitido profundizar en los estudios. Además, se ha negociado cerca de 134 millones de dólares con la intención de transferir esos recursos a ese dueño del bosque, para que así ellos vean al bosque no solamente como muchas veces o años anteriores se pensaba, como ir en contra del desarrollo, sino también que el bosque se vea como un ingreso importante, y es precisamente lo que venimos haciendo hasta hoy, vamos a implementar este año con lo que es un pago por servicio ambiental especial que hemos denominado Contrato de Reducción de Emisiones Forestales CREF, en donde producto de esos ingresos que hemos tenido, de los convenios que hemos firmado con el Fondo Verde del Clima, con el Fondo Cooperativo de Carbono para los Bosques, vamos a transferirle a esos pequeños productores los recursos producto de la mitigación que esos bosques han hecho. Con esto yo espero, así una pincelada, algo muy rápido, contarles un poco lo que hemos hecho en Costa Rica para parar la deforestación y lo que aspiramos a seguir haciendo para que efectivamente estas cadenas de suministros y todo producto exportable que salga de Costa Rica podamos en el corto tiempo decir que es libre de deforestación. Muchas gracias y aquí cualquier pregunta o ampliación, pues con muchísimo gusto.
Muchas gracias, Jorge. And you made me feel very good because now both of us as co-hosts have blatantly disregarded our own time limitation. But this is a multifaceted problem with many aspects also in the solution, so it's not so easy to be super short. Nonetheless, I will call on our panel, which is now beginning, to be a bit more disciplined than we were, if you can. And bearing in mind that we have several interventions, try and be succinct. And we would be starting now with our first panelist from the UN, from UNDP more specifically. And we are being joined by Pascal Bonzon, who has very kindly stepped in for a colleague who fell ill. And Pascal told us she may have some small children, I think, enter the meeting as she's speaking. So we all know that from Zoom conferences, that makes them actually extra fun. Pascal, you have a long experience in working on the ground, so I have a practitioner's perspective also in how we can develop sustainable value chains, and it will be very interesting to hear your experience and your perspective. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Astrid. And yes, I'm stepping up for Andrew Bovarnik, the head of UNDP's Food and Agricultural Commodities Practice. And I am global project manager in that team. So yes, I do have experience in that space, and I will tell you a bit about it. So, but first of all, thank you very much to the organizers for inviting us, UNDP, to this event. We are very excited to be here. And I would like to share a bit of our experience related to reducing deforestation from commodities supply chains. First of all, I wanted to say that in UNDP, we view deforestation in agricultural commodity supply chains, such as palm oil, soy, beef, cocoa, or coffee, as a complex problem that is linked to economic and social development issues in producing countries, such as poverty, weak governance, youth unemployment, gender inequalities, even limited access to energy, alongside environmental issues such as climate change and biodiversity loss. To those issues, we obviously can add crises and shocks that disrupt agricultural commodity supply chains, such as the COVID-19 pandemic and now the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So as the development agency in the UN system able to take a multidisciplinary approach, UNDP, we feel, is well placed to work in support of transforming food and agricultural commodity systems towards more sustainability, resilience, equity, and inclusivity. We believe strongly that we must transform those systems if we are to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. As a trusted development partner with a long-term presence in more than 170 countries, UNDP has worked through various initiatives to develop comprehensive and inclusive policies that integrate environmental sustainability and climate change into agricultural commodity sectors for now decades. Actually, in 2010, UNDP launched the Green Commodities Program, known as GCP, to play this important role in countries where heavily traded agricultural commodities are important pillars of national and local economies. So over 11 plus years of working in agricultural supply chains, UNDP has put in place strong methodologies and approaches that emphasize integrated and systemic approaches to complex development challenges. This means breaking down silos, looking beyond sectoral challenges to find opportunities for transformative change, understanding interdependencies and leveraging links between interventions to achieve broader goals rather than seeking to answer a single question. Typically, UNDP approaches in practice include facilitating multi-stakeholder dialogue platforms, collaborations and action plans, supporting policy reform to improve the context everyone is working within, capacity and system strengthening, which includes producers' support system and land use management and monitoring. Interesting that our colleague Jorge from Costa Rica, from FONAFIFO, mentioned MOCUP, of course, which is one such system that he mentioned UNDP and GIZ have been supporting Costa Rica on. And fourthly, the approach includes fostering and aligning financial and economic incentives to encourage the right outcomes. So what is the added value of UNDP through this approach is to really take a multidisciplinary, multi-sector approach, working through the whole of government, so interministerial, but also the whole of society, thanks to our broad development mandate and convening power. We take a multi-scale approach also, working at global, national, and subnational levels and linking these levels. And we partner with others to leverage collective, specialized knowledge and expertise. We also try to unlock and catalyze public and private funding. So let me give you a few examples of achievements through our work at country level across the world. In Indonesia, for instance, UNDP has supported the development and now the implementation of a government-endorsed national action plan for sustainable palm oil, which has become a key framework on efforts at different jurisdictional levels to improve the enabling environment, the institutional capacities and smallholder livelihoods in the country's palm oil sector. Quite similarly, in Liberia, a national action plan for sustainable palm oil was defined and endorsed through a collaborative multi-stakeholder process, while working on improving land use planning and partnering with communities to protect important conservation areas and enhance community resilience to climate change. Moving to Latin America, in Peru, UNDP mainstreamed sustainable production practices in the Peruvian coffee sector through the National Commodity Platform and Action Plan and different projects such as sustainable productive landscapes in the Amazon. And finally, in Costa Rica, our co-host, one of the focus country we just heard about today, UNDP strengthened commitment to the sustainable use of marine resources through the National Platform for Sustainable Fisheries of Large Pelagics, and also a while ago boosted the sustainability of the pineapple sector through the National Initiative for Sustainable Pineapple Production. So that comes in addition to what Jorge has already mentioned. So I'll stop for now. I think I made it to 5 minutes. And we'll be looking forward to more exchanges during the panel discussion. Over back to you, Astrid. Thanks.
Thanks, Pascal. You've been a role model in conciseness. Thank you so much. We move on to the private sector and to Evert Rijmakers from the Roundtable for Responsible Soy. And Evert has kindly agreed to introduce the Roundtable in the beginning of his remarks, so we all know what the work is of that organization. Evert, over to you.
Thank you very much, Astrid. Can you hear me clearly? Perfect. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. My name is Evert Rijmakers. I am the Outreach and Engagement Manager for RTRS, the Roundtable on Responsible Soy. And I would like to start by thanking the host for inviting us today to give us the opportunity to engage with you. And I hope that our contribution will be of value in all these efforts. The Roundtable on Responsible Soy was founded as a Swiss association in 2006. And it is really, excuse me, yeah. It is engaging with representatives throughout the entire soy value chain. So varying from farmers, producers, industry, trade finance, NGOs, CSOs, etc. The RTRS is really a multi-stakeholder and consensus-based roundtable. For us, there are actually two functions to RTRS. One is this one. We are a dialogue. We seek participation and cooperation with all the actors throughout the soy value chain. And secondly, one of our ways of approaching that, one of our toolboxes, so to speak, is that we are an independent standard and certification scheme. So we are a non-profit, independent standard owner. The RTRS, as I mentioned, sets the standard for responsible soy production, as well as a standard for chain of custody. I will come to the other one a little bit later. The importance is that the sustainability production standard is holistic in nature. We focus on safeguarding social, environmental, economic aspects, legal aspects, of course. We believe that these are all connected and interlinked, and therefore must be approached in a proper way. Pascal was just already mentioning that they also believe very much in this approach, and it's something that we have always really cherished. One of the key elements, talking about the topic of today, in the production standard is, of course, the environmental responsibility. Here, I would like to point out that there are two cutoff dates that are for us very important. RTRS stands for Zero Deforestation, Zero Conversion. It started in 2009 with our standard, which was focusing on zero deforestation and conversion of a number of ecosystems, as you see in the block on the left. We added to that in 2016 a new cutoff date of June the 3rd, 2016, after which we said no conversion of any natural land will be allowed anymore. So that includes grasslands, savannas, prairie, cerrado, anything like that. This is a fundamental and a very essential part of our production standard, and we hope, of course, to be able to expand that much bigger in the future. Next to that, good agricultural practices are an essential part of what we work with farmers and what we promote. It speaks for itself. This is an important way to prevent environmental pollution, for example, through responsible crop management techniques to avoid too much use of agrochemicals. For example, we promote no tillage, which is a good way of achieving soil sequestration, carbon sequestration. The production standard is, in fact, what we see a very powerful tool to reach sustainable agricultural practices, both on farm level as well as reaching regional impact. Because this is not something that's only done on one farm, this is something that's happening on a bigger scale. This is very important to mention that the book and claim or credit system, as it is called in our case, is also a very fundamental way of accomplishing that. In principle, every farm that is certified according to all the same 108 criteria and is also chain of custody certified. So whatever enters into the market, even as a credit system, comes from a responsible source. The Profundo benchmark, which was commissioned by the IUCN, has done a ranking, and we are proud to see that we have come up in a very high ranking here, both on biodiversity protection as well as in levels of assurance. And of course, we aim to continue that. Part of that is through the accreditation system. We work with third-party verification, which is done presently by 8 internationally accredited certification bodies. They do the audits, the inspections, they give out the certificates. We monitor them very, very closely, and farmers are also expected to rotate with these certification bodies. All of that is, of course, in the light of increasing credibility and assurance. Briefly looking at supply chain models that are available, chain of custody models. Chain of custody is basically describing the requirements for the different traceability systems that an organization can implement. Mass balance, segregation, both for GMO and non-GMO, has been available to the market and to companies and organizations since many years. We have been EU RED compliant also for several years for the biofuels industry. Zooming in briefly on what is segregated, it means that the physical RTRS certified soy coming from one or multiple facilities is kept physically separate throughout a supply chain from other sources of non-RTRS certified soy. Last year, we introduced also a corn standard next to the soy standard for the simple reason that there is a continuous crop rotation to be seen between corn and soy. So this is an additional stimulus for farmers to be engaged, and it's also a new offering to the world market. Some of the latest remarks. This is to show we have been happily seeing an increasing production of responsible soy, volume as well as the uptake. That is really good news. The bottom line, perhaps good to point out, the Euromonitor Soy Monitor 2020 showed that EU plus consumption was at approximately 30 million tons. That is what we consume in Europe. And the European uptake of RTRS certified production in that was 3.8 million tons. So that's almost 13%. It shows that this is an effective tool. It's not the only one, of course, but it is an effective tool, and it has already created substantial volume. There's been a good growth in the chain of custody certification. This is a very positive news because it shows that multiple industries are in fact moving towards physical sourcing one way or the other, and chain of custody is something that you really need for that. This is to demonstrate where we are. The majority of the soy production in RTRS is happening in South America, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, but also increasingly in India, in China. And next to that, what you can see on this map as well is that there is an increasing amount of chain of custody facilities all over the world, and we still see this trend growing. Again, this is really positive news. Latest developments. Obviously, the trend to shift to physical soy, and I would say commodity sourcing, which is very much triggered by the European Commission, the regulation that Astrid was talking about earlier. This is something we applaud very much. We think it's fantastic. The UK, the DEFRA Due Diligence is also having a similar parallel trajectory. And the role of voluntary certification systems, VSS as certification is often referred to, is of course very much on the agenda. And I'm here to talk to you about that. As a result of that, we have been looking to see what complementary innovations can we undertake to follow this trend of the newly developed legislation. What is needed? How can we help all the soy supply chain actors in meeting with those requirements? There are two things that we are doing predominantly. Number one, we are revising and reshaping our global RTRS chain of custody standard. It needs to be more meticulous in some aspects, and it still needs to be usable on a global scale. Today, I would like to point out particularly the second point. We are exploring the possibility of developing a new chain of custody module, a supply chain module, which is deforestation-free verified. In a sense, that means that it is using RTRS certified soy plus non-RTRS certified soy, but RTRS verified soy, which meets the requirements, the due diligence requirements as set forth by the European Commission. Astrid spoke about that earlier. And we are currently working on that. We are running a project, and of course, we are very hopeful that in the course of this year, we will be able to complete that successfully. But as you all know, this is a very complex matter, and no simple solutions are available. So we are aware that this is a big challenge. So in short, why be part of RTRS? Well, this is not a promotion talk this evening to you, of course, but we believe that the following aspects are indeed important. We think that a holistic and comprehensive approach is really important. We cannot zoom in on only one topic while ignoring the other one. Again, Pascal mentioned poverty is very often one of the big drivers. We need to protect indigenous people. We need to make sure there's no child labor. All of these aspects, as they are laid forth in several conventions, etc., are part of our standard. Ambitious cutoff dates, multi-stakeholder environment. We truly believe that a dialogue with all different, sometimes conflicting parties is the only way to really move forward. We have seen that from the volumes that it is scalable, both in production as well as in uptake, and it is usable for different industries, and that is what is needed. We need economies of scale. We need a critical mass to really move forward with this incredible challenge. And we are proud to be members of the ICEAL Alliance, which for us is a very strong indicator of the institutional credibility of RTRS. And I hope, Astrid, I stayed more or less in your time frame, and I look forward to the panel discussion later.
Thank you, Evert. And I know you told us you did a dry run in 7 minutes. Now it was a bit longer. I think our panel discussion will be short, but there are many interesting points and also shared points, I think, between you and everybody else who's spoken so far, notably on the multi-stakeholder approach, the need for dialogue and the supply chain, the transparency points, etc., etc. Anke, we finally come to you, Anke Schulmeister from WWF, who has been accompanying also our own work in the European Union quite critically, but I think also is a known forest expert way beyond the European Union. So please share with us your perspective in 6 minutes, if you can. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Astrid, and thank you very much for the invitation. I mean, you have the choice. I can do that in 2 minutes, but at a speed that nobody will understand, or try to do it in 5. So I think from my perspective, a lot of things have already been said, and very interesting points. I think, I would quickly like to go into the element of challenges for change. So I do think, having been working in the EU, I'm going to talk a bit more from my experience and European perspective, also working with the global network and others, but also from what I've seen, why addressing deforestation is hard. And I think, the first thing, I would like to give you is, again, numbers. It's always nice to start with numbers. So if you look at the amount of global wildfires that actually took place in 2021, they emitted as much carbon as, or actually 180%, 148% more than the EU total emissions of fossil fuels were in 2020. So I think that's something to be kept in mind, together with the fact that since the 1970s, we have lost about 68% of wildlife populations globally. That combined with the fact that, agriculture leads, as was stated earlier, to about 90% of deforestation, should give us an interesting starting point of the urgency that we are currently facing. It is time for a change, but change seems to be difficult. And I think, when we look at reasons why it is so difficult to address the problem, I do not think that there is one underlying element and only one solution. There are maybe more blocks. And I think, I try to identify 3 different blocks, and I think the first is about changing demand. The challenge which we are facing is that, the demand is increasing certainly, in many areas not decreasing, especially for agricultural products, be this domestically or be this for exports. EU is a big importing nation for other commodities. And I think, taking the example of the EU is the second biggest importer of products associated with deforestation worldwide, 16%. That makes it, just after China. And from that perspective, changing demand means changing what a consumer, is consuming from one perspective or the other, and that is difficult. Personal change, not taking, the chocolate spread tomorrow and morning on your toast is difficult. Whatever is personal is difficult, but it is linked to the fact that we often do not know. There is no knowledge, I think, in many places about the fact that our food can have impacts on nature and on people. We should never forget that there's also the human element towards it. Increasing consumption is linked to other demands, that raise the demand for more land to produce more agriculture, land grabbing and land speculation, more profit, or at least not less profit for companies. It is a big area that needs to be addressed, and it means then to really be clear about how can it be done. What have we achieved so far? And if we look at it from that perspective, so far a lot of voluntary measures have been proposed and been done, and they're important. But I have to admit, having worked in this area for so long, it is a range of measures we need. But of course, what we need these days are binding measures. We cannot rely on voluntary measures alone for us, or voluntary commitments or labels to actually solve the problem. We need binding measures, and I do think, therefore, the approach from the European Union, by the way, also other countries, to put forward legislative frameworks is important. The second, challenge for change, let's call it like this, is commitment versus real change. There are numerous commitments from companies, also from governments and leaders, to stop deforestation, halt deforestation. Latest example is the Glasgow Leadership Declaration, who is asking for change by 2030. And I was very much reminded that, the 2030 date is nothing new. That was already something we had in the New York Declaration on Forests a number of years back. Meanwhile, the rates of deforestation globally are not really going down, or as in some regions, as we have seen in Brazil this year, are going up again. So it is comparably easy to commit, as it seems, but it's comparably harder to really, make these commitments then into a real applicable way of reducing the impacts. And I think, there we need to look into the perspective of how do we make it work? How do we actually set ourselves, based on clear analysis, the targets that are necessary, and then accompany them with the policies, be it now company policies or also government policies needed, and include the right people. It's all about stakeholders' involvement to come to solutions. But what this requires is an overall mindset that is solution-oriented, a mindset that wants change. One of the things which I hear all of the time, about the EU regulation is that is too complicated, that is too difficult. And I do think, the question should not, be, it is not possible, but how do I make it possible? I think there's enough experience out there to bring things together. So let's work on that. The third, I think, big challenge towards change is how to support those affected by change. Addressing deforestation or ecosystem conversion, it's not about only forests, it's also about other ecosystems like, savannas and grasslands. We'll have to look at the impacts it might have on the vulnerable, on smallholders, on communities, on local communities and indigenous peoples, on their lack of land use rights, on their threatened or threat, by poverty, and a lot of other elements linked to it. But what is also often forgotten is that, these people who are there on these lands now and who might lose, or might be considered as being vulnerable, are already being affected. They are being affected by climate change. Quality of the soils is decreasing. Also, land grabbing leads them to lose their homes. So I think, it's this way to finding a way to support those in a way that is meaningful and includes them in the debate. And I do think that there, especially the consuming countries, are or have the possibility and potentially also the need to support, alternative livelihoods for those ones that will not be able to to keep on going the way they did and actually support the producing countries in addressing the underlying drivers of change. And I think, from that perspective, I do not want to speak too long. What we need to look into now is what are the solutions that will lead us to change. And to change that is fast. Because, looking at the numbers I gave you before, I do not think that we have that much time left, to actually go for change. And we have seen a lot of different, elements, how change could be brought about. But I do think the question is, how do we make this change now something that leads to change at scale, something that is meaningful or reduces it? And I think, with regards to changing demand, we need to combine voluntary measures with more binding measures. It is all about carrot and stick. We need to really, and this is more directed also towards governments and others, stand by our words. If we commit to halt deforestation, we need to make this work, and we need to make this work together in the UN framework and in other areas, but really implement and not only commit. And, we need to find the right ways to reduce the negative consequences for those that might be affected by more binding measures. And I think I'll leave it at that to gain a bit of time for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Anke. Yeah, time for the panel discussion. That's now a bit of a challenge. We are basically now at the end of the time we had allocated for the panel discussion. What I suggest we can unfortunately not have a proper discussion. I had threatened everybody with 2 questions. I don't think we have time for that. What I would just say, maybe I can open the floor for all panelists. You've now heard the various perspectives. You've heard a lot about the challenges, number of solutions proposed just now by Anke. If any of you wants to add in 1 minute to what you've been saying, to either sort of identify what you see as the key challenge on which the international community has to focus even more, or an example of best practice that you would like to highlight that one could study further, please, any of you, to just take the floor, and please just 1 minute, and then we would hand over to Ambassador Guignard for some closing comments.
Astrid, may I?
Yeah. Yes, please.
I would like to, well, thank you, and bounce on what Anke was just saying. So very quickly, from my point of view, the change will need to be incentivized, obviously, and policies can be incentivizing, negatively or positively, but incentivizing. And of course, the demand can be incentivizing. Also finance, we haven't spoken so much about finance, but financial flows can be redirected to be more incentivizing. And I think aligning these incentives in a way that then motivates behavior change with producers is what we need. And I just wanted to say that with the Good Cross Partnership, which is a partnership among several organizations, including UNDP, UNEP, WWF, actually, IFC, and ICIL, actually also, who was mentioned by RTRS, we have piloted such an approach, which we called an integrated supply chain approach, and we have recently released a report with lessons learned on this approach. So I can share with you the link, which you can share after this meeting, and this way we can share some of the best practices and the recommendations for any new actions in that space. So I'll stop there. Back to you, Astrid.
Thanks, Pascal. That's a very welcome suggestion. So indeed, maybe you can put it already in the chat, and we're happy to circulate it also afterwards. I think we have 2 requests. I don't know who came first. Maybe Jorge Mario, were you?
Sí, muchas gracias. Tal vez así en forma rápida, 2 desafíos muy grandes. Uno, creo yo, que es que al bosque tenemos que darle el valor más allá de la madera, sin dejar de lado que la madera es un bien importante para los dueños de las fincas, pero también falta mucho que recorrer en cuanto al reconocimiento de los servicios ambientales que se derivan de las masas boscosas, y todavía hoy a nivel internacional no vemos ese reconocimiento que refleje en una mejor economía para el dueño de la finca o el productor. Otra cosa importante que yo mencionaría en esto es, y que lo estamos haciendo con el PNUD, tiene que ver con lo que es la restauración del paisaje y enseñarle a los productores que pueden producir igual o más en menos área siempre y cuando la vocación de esa parte de la finca sea para lo que se está dedicando. Y también, así como tercer punto, que tenemos que fortalecer el compartir experiencia, lo que es la capacitación, y también fortalecer la asistencia técnica, particularmente para el pequeño y mediano productor, que muchas veces no tienen ese beneficio y por lo tanto sus acciones no son los más amigables con el ambiente. Entonces, con estas cosas yo creo que podemos nosotros hacer la diferencia y podemos en el corto plazo tal vez pensar en que ya los productos que exportamos, los productos que consumimos, efectivamente se dan sin que vaya eso en detrimento del bosque, más bien que sea un complemento de esa unidad productiva que encontramos en los paisajes productivos de nuestros países. Gracias.
Thank you very much. Evert, quick comment?
Yeah, thank you, Astrid. I can say many things about logistics, whatever, but I would like to highlight on two things. One was mentioned already, incentives. I believe there must be a proper way to reward those producers, those farmers worldwide that are complying with sustainable criteria. And that is, I believe, really a fundamental way to move forward. Poverty is very often a reason why unsustainable practices are knowingly or sometimes unknowingly conducted. Secondly, I would like to say, please let's not reinvent the wheel. There are so many new initiatives coming up from so many different backgrounds in the sense of how do we find a solution towards sustainability. I think there are a lot of really well-established tools available. The key, I believe, is to see how do we categorize them in the sense of being different types of interventions, and how do we make sure that these different interventions, the proven tools, so to speak, can work together. And there must be, I would say, also a criteria set in the sense of who is eligible for that, and how do we make it scalable. So please, let's not reinvent the wheel by inventing so many more new initiatives as we see actually popping up around us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now seriously over time, but I see that Barbara from the UNFF Secretariat has raised her hand, so it would be great if we could also have
Yeah, so no, it's a very quick comment. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. It's just to say thanks to the European Union for holding this side event during UNFF. It has been very informative.
At all.
Okay. Hopefully you hear me. Thank you for the European Union for holding this side event during the UNFF session. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. We shared it with Costa Rica. We've been working together on this.
Thank you for the government of Costa Rica as well. Thank you.
No, it was just another example of our excellent cooperation, I think both in New York and beyond. We were going to move to some closing remarks by our French EU presidency, Monsieur Ambassadeur Pierre-Henri Guillard. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the connection situation is. Ambassador, are you able to intervene at this point? If you are speaking, I think you're still muted. You seem to be connected by telephone. Okay, maybe that will give the ambassador.
If I may, sorry, I'm Justine de Boisfleury, working with the ambassador. Mm-hmm. He is trying to connect actually from France, and he might have some difficulties in delivering his intervention as concluding words. So as we can see that we cannot hear him, if you allow me, I can share on his behalf the few concluding words that he had prepared.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I hope that you're then hearing me well. We first, of course, welcome the European Union and Costa Rica mission for having organizing this event, and thanks also to all the intervenants, because we have had very wise and interesting interventions. So it will be quite difficult to have conclusive words on this, but I will try to deliver the ones that we are prepared for. Mr. the Ambassador, who apologize, I'm sure, for not being with us. So we are conscious today, very conscious now that we must change our production and consumption patterns, and we are even more conscious of it after this event, if possible. They are no longer sustainable and bearable for our planet. I have heard something. I don't know if Mr. Ambassador, you want to intervene now.
Yes. Can you? I don't know if you can listen to me.
Yes, thank you. I'll leave you the floor.
I'm absolutely sorry, Justine, you were doing that very well. And I'm absolutely sorry, I have a very difficult line today because of an internet breakdown, but I've been able to listen to you, and I had difficulties to connect the mic. But if you can bear my bad connection, I would like to just thank very much the European Union for this, the organization of this meeting with Costa Rica. And I think it's very, very useful in the midst of this UNFF 17th meeting. Really, we appreciate all the contributions that have been brought to our attention. Just want to react before 2 or 3 words on what we have been talking about. I just heard one of you asking us not to reinvent the wheel, and I agree. That's precisely that's a good advice. At the same time, it's clear that the wheel is not working properly today, because we are very much seeing how rainforest is being damaged by our current production and consumption patterns. These are no longer sustainable and bearable for our planet. Our international trade is having direct harmful consequences on the environment and on us, and will continue to do so if we don't change. So something has to be changed at some point. The production of agricultural commodities remains one of the main drivers of forest loss, excluding forest fires, of course, in 2021, according to the World Resources Institute. But tropical forests in particular are a prime example of this tragedy. We desperately need them for their climatic, socio-economic, and biodiversity benefits, yet we keep losing and destroying them. Tropical areas are estimated to have lost 11.1 million hectares of forest cover by 2021, according to Global Forest Watch, including 3.75 million hectares of primary forest. This loss by 2021 represents the emission of 2.5 gigatons of carbon dioxide, equivalent to India's annual fossil fuel emissions. And we can't stand that. It's impossible. So I agree that reversing the trend is not easy. We need to take action in all places and by all means in order to make our production and supply chains more sustainable, especially for agricultural commodities, so that they no longer negatively impact the world's forests. So I thank you very much for the contributions we have had today. At the level of public and governmental sectors, we need to create the conditions for sustainability and fairness in the supply chains. Ensure that the commodities we produce and export on the one hand and import and consume on the other do not contribute anymore to forest loss or degradation. And this can be achieved through clear and ambitious policies to regulate and support this transition in both producing and consuming countries. Costa Rica, which again I salute here, has given an example of it through its national policies as described in its intervention and its international mobilization on these subjects, for example, within the Alliance for Conservation of Rainforest, is also another example of positive and necessary mobilization. On the consuming side, France, sorry to put us in front of all of you, has initiated its own national strategy to fight against important deforestation since 2018. This is also what Europe, with 27 member states, is trying to regulate currently, always to allow and accompany this necessary change at all levels of the value chain. For all of this, political dialogue between countries is fundamental and at the highest level. The UNFF, which also I salute here, in the context of which this side event is being held, is the key venue for this broad dialogue between all the UN member countries gathered together. The UNFF provides this framework and should continue to work for better policy coordination and mainstreaming of forests in order to promote sustainable and deforestation-free value chains. This is a theme we have discussed with Juliette, and I want to salute her once again, and I hope we can work together on this. On its side, the Alliance for the Conservation of Rainforest is a coalition that also shares this ambition. Indeed, the Alliance aims to provide a framework for such dialogue around common concerns, the survival of rainforest. The Alliance has included the implementation of sustainable value chains and zero deforestation among the principles and objectives of its charter, which recently became a concrete roadmap for action. There are many other thematic dialogues. I don't want to go too much into detail, but we have to work with the forest agriculture and commodity trade dialogue or the Amsterdam Declaration Partnership. They are going in the same goals with different coalitions, but we are going in the same directions. States alone are limited in their capacity of action. They cannot do everything, and we see the limits for all of us. That's why we have to reach to the stakeholders, for instance, the private sector, research sector, civil society. They have to join in, and we have to work together in giving substance and reality to the dialogue for sustainable value chains, and above all, for the implementation of effective and appropriate measures. As expressed by many participants I have been able to listen to these events, initiatives are multiplying and we need to coordinate. Again, with the private sector, with NGOs, representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities, youth and women, and many others. They have all to come together and enhance their mobilization with the help of governments so that the states pursue it effectively and usefully and vice versa. Dialogue and coordination are the key words of this shared ambition, and events like this one contribute greatly to it. I thank you very much for your patience, for this invitation that provided and to give me the opportunity to provide these few words of conclusion. And I wish you fruitful continuation of your work within the framework of UNFF in New York, and to those countries who haven't joined the Alliance for Conservation of Rainforest, please join us, join the 30+ countries already in the Alliance, forest countries, consumer countries. I'm sorry to sound like I'm making a commercial, but the more we are, and the better we can act to preserve rainforest. Thank you very much, Astrid, and sorry for being long and for being probably difficult to hear.
You were very clear. Thank you, Ambassador, and I think you said it all. So really nothing to add, but to just underline your call for action and for action together for all of us, and and also maybe the message of urgency that came across, I think, from all speakers. So thank you very much for participating in this event, for staying with us. I wish New York participants a good afternoon, others a good evening, and if the colleagues from Malaysia or the Philippines have actually joined us from their native countries, I hope you can still catch a few hours of sleep. Thank you so much, and I also wish everybody a good continuation of the UNFF discussions. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bueno,
Thank you very much.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.